not to say.
I'll fix the whole thing.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome back from lunch. Hope you enjoyed your Q&A with Paul and Rob, and also got some food. We have joining us now this afternoon the lovely John McKernon, the nicest man in show business. He is Mr. Lightwright, man who invented it, but more than that, he has also been an associate a lot in his life. He has worked on lots of Chicago's, worked for Ken Billington, and is also a designer in his own right. Does lots of dance and things like that. So we're excited to be able to talk to him today. So John, how did it all start for you? Where did your illustrious lighting career begin?
How did my illustrious lighting career begin? Began without doing lighting. I had a puppet theater when I was a kid. I bought the puppets, but my father and I made a stage. He was an electrical engineer, so he actually, wired up little candelabra-based sockets with no insulation. I learned about getting shocked real fast, and probably continue that tradition to today. But I made up shows and did it for the neighbors and stuff, and that was my theater beginning. Didn't do anything in school really until my senior year in high school, my last year, when I did publicity for a show, and then I pulled the curtain for one of the shows, and then I started acting, and I guess the rest was history. I did a Summer with the Common Glory, which is an outdoor drama in Williamsburg, Virginia, as an intern, and you take acting classes and dance classes, which were the best thing I've ever done. I haven't felt so good after a morning in the dance studio. If I could do that today, it'd be great. Anyway, ran Follow Spot for them for 2 years. Went to William and Mary for 2 years, where I flunked Spanish twice, but I did a whole lot of theater. I was in a lot of shows. I directed a show. I painted a lot of scenery, all that stuff. Then I kind of ran out of classes, and I talked to the guy who was in charge of lighting, and I said I'd heard there was this new place called the North Carolina School of the Arts. And I talked to the guy who was in charge of lighting at William & Mary, and he said, yeah, I think you've kind of outstripped us here. So I transferred to School of the Arts. I was there for 3 years because they wanted to hang on to me and they needed somebody to design, they said. I learned about actual lighting design. I painted a whole lot of scenery. I was also a scene design major.
Right.
I stitched costumes. I assisted Christina Giannini on things for Ohio Ballet. It's a very intense program, and you do a whole lot of practical work. I also did 3 summers of summer theater, where we did 7 shows in 7 weeks in 2 theaters. The big theater was like a 40-foot proscenium. We alternated musicals in that one, and then the small one was an arena space, which fortunately I didn't have to do much with. But I was the tech director and the lighting designer for the big theater, and you learn real fast how to prioritize what's going to matter. Is a set actually going to be finished? Or, as in the case of Camelot, we had one whole set that was never painted. It went up in the flies and never came down until strike. So you light whatever you've got, however time you have it. And it was amazing training to do that. And, getting to meet people like Tom Skelton and have your world turned upside down and realize that, oh my God, what you can do with color and how the real world organizes themselves and that kind of thing was really a pretty terrific thing. What's funny is at the end of my school career, I had no plans whatsoever. I had no idea what I was going to do next. And Christina Giannini, again, Stia, called me and said, so John, could you come to New York for a few weeks and help me make Spider-Man vitamin costumes? And I said,
for what?
Come to New York? Sure. Well, there was a thing called Spider-Man vitamins, which were little vitamins that looked kind of like Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
And they needed costumes for people to go to malls dressed as Spider-Man.
Okay, so promotional stuff. Yeah. Wow, cool.
Right. So I said, 3 weeks in New York and I get paid? Sure. Well, 6 months later, we're still making Spider-Man vitamin costumes and all kinds of other things. I'm still sleeping on her sofa. Her sister suggested maybe I should get an apartment. And so I did. um, and then I started lighting around stuff, just, in New York, that kind of thing. One of the choreographers from School of the Arts started a dance company, Pauline Koner. She was a famous old modern dance person. And she asked me to come and light her stuff, so I did that. I opened a scene painting studio with Campbell Baird, who's now my husband. That was very successful. We had a good time with that. But at a certain point, I said I was going to be a lighting designer, and here I am running a scene painting shop. I need to be a lighting designer. Now, along the way, in the middle of the scene painting shop thing, we had payroll and all, and it was pretty dreary. And in 1979, I was touring with Pauline and writing the same hookup over and over and over. And it was a lot of writer's cramp and sharpened pencils and all that. And I bought my first computer then. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I sort of came into lighting sideways.
Well, that's great. So you're doing all that dance stuff in New York, and then is that when you come across Ken, or is there more to the story?
Well, I had met Ken. At one point, I was teaching at SUNY Stony Brook, which is where I was when I bought the first computer. Well, no, actually, that's a later story. And he had come to see a production of, I think he came to see, no, maybe he didn't. I'm misremembering most of this. Anyway, where I really first met him was he was showing, a group of us went to see the Red Parrot in New York, which is a big new nightclub that Ken had lit.
Okay.
And we went like 11 o'clock at night or whatever, and met Ken. There were like 6 or 8 of us. And I was immediately struck by how open he was, how involved he was. I mean, truly involved and invested in every aspect of the club. And also how when a stage manager for the club came up and had a question for him, he immediately shut off talking to us and went straight to business and answered a question, solved the problem, and then flipped a switch, and he was back to us. And I went, right, this man knows what's important. And this is amazing. And he's great fun and all the rest of it. But when business is business, it's business. And that was really cool. And then I didn't see him again for, many, many years. Do you want to talk about how I actually got into Ken's office, or is that?
Sure. Is that a fun story you feel comfortable sharing?
It's actually a funny one. To get into one of the things you're supposed to do that everybody said you should do when you're in New York is you should join Local 829, the Scene Designers, Lighting Designer, Costume Designer Union. And so I took the exam a total of 4 times. I flunked the first 3 times. Back then it was a very long and very complicated 3-day thing. There was also a home project. You had to do it first, and then you went in for an interview, and then you went into a practical where you actually, lit actors and scenery on stage for a selected scene while a big group of judges and all watched you. Very high pressure. But
Sounds terrible.
it was awful for everybody involved. But you really could see if the person knew what they were doing. I mean, do they know how to talk to the board op? Are they making cues that come even close to what they said they were going to do with the lighting? So in a lot of ways, it made a lot of sense. But they've ultimately abandoned it because it was just way too expensive and nobody could afford it. It was also the days where you didn't have a computer or anything at that point. So you had to draft as part of this, and you literally brought your drafting table, your T-squares, your triangles, your sharpeners, everything with you to the venue for 3 days. And you drafted all day and did paperwork all day in between darting off to light a little dance thing that was another part of the project that they had. But anyway, so it was very complicated. But I was honestly too stupid to flunk it and then find out why I flunked it later. I just flunked it and went, oh, whatever. And I went back to lighting shows and, painting scenery and all that kind of stuff. But I think it was 1984, a friend of mine who happened to be one of the monitors on the exam committee said, John, this is your year. You need to take the exam. This is ridiculous. You're working all the time. You need to be in the union. And so by that point, I guess I had learned enough about what they were looking for that I knew how to do it. And so I went to the interview. I did the home project. And then you go to the interview where they see if you're good enough. You go to the interview and they can either say, no, you're terrible, go home. They would say, okay, you're great, you're in. Or we can't decide, you need to take the practical, the whole long part.
Right.
So by this point, I was actually already had a thing called electric assistant, which was the precursor to ALD. And I was using it to do my paperwork. And there was no way I was going to handwrite my paperwork for anything in those days. So when I took my stuff to the union exam this time, it was computer printed paperwork, on dot matrix and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, the judges saw this, and half of them were like, "Oh my God, this is incredible! This is exactly what we've been wanting all this time."
Yeah.
And the other half of the judges said, "This is cheating. You can't do this. You have to write it by hand." And here I am in the middle going, I just want to get in the union. So the interview, they then put you out in the hallway while they have a closed door session where they decide what they're going to do with you. And during the closed door session, they yelled and screamed bloody murder at each other, the two sides. They could not agree because it was cheating.
And was Ken in on this session? Is that right?
No, Ken was not on that session at all. But anyway, so they sent me on, they couldn't decide. So they sent me on to the practical, basically pushing me down the road. So I went to the practical, and, this was now the fourth time that I was there to do the practical. Most people are really, really blindingly nervous at the practical. I mean, people throw up in the whole 9 yards. It was very tense. But I was actually tired because I'd been on tour for a week and a half or whatever, and came back and wanted to relax. But you had to fill out a hookup that said where you wanted or what color you wanted each light to be in. And they had to strike the focus for the whole show so you could go in and focus it again. This was part of what made it expensive, was you had a union crew there and they had to refocus lights, 20 times a day. But anyway, so while they were in prepping for me, I was sitting at a table outside in the hallway, and I was sleepy, so I put my head down and took a nap. And Jason Kantrowitz, who was associate at Ken Billington, his principal assistant at that point, was one of the monitors. And he came up to the table and said, woke me up and said, "Are you okay?" Because apparently most people are sick or, whatever. And I said, "Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm just, I pooped, that's all." He said, "Nobody's ever fallen asleep while waiting to go in to take the practical.
They're terrified.
This is nuts. Most people are terrified." So anyway, we had a laugh about it. And I went in and knew what I was doing, and I knew what they were looking for, and I aced it. It was fine. And the next morning, obviously, Jason had talked to Ken. And the next morning I had a call from Ken. He was looking for someone to be in charge of his architectural lighting. And would I be interested in coming to interview for it? And I didn't know the first thing about architectural lighting, but I said, yes, I'll do anything with Mr. Billington. So I went in and I got it, and that's it. And that's how I started work for Ken.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Well, that's great. Well, so listen, a lot of the people on this course here are really new to the idea of being an assistant or an associate, which is something you've done a lot, either for Ken or other designers. Can you tell us about your first time working on, either first time or just first time on a big show
with Ken?
Yeah, or yeah, sure, with Ken. Yeah.
Ken's always the subject. It's hard to say. I spent a total of 15 years full time with Ken. The architectural years were tough. The interior designer we worked with the most was extremely demanding. I learned how to be creative and come up with a different way to light the bathrooms every week. They were always the thing that was the hardest. You couldn't just have a normal bathroom. It had to be in the same theme as the rest of the restaurant. So that part gets interesting. But now Ken, watching Ken and working with Ken, I learned how the grown-ups work. And it was similar to what I did, but much more demanding, much more precise. They knew exactly why they made every decision. And I mean, I knew from my own experience, yes, you want to leave spares on the plot, but um, it was Ken's joy in doing all of it that really, really struck me. And the ability to somehow juggle, 6 or 8 shows at the same time. That's I had done it in my own limited way. I'd be on tour and there would be things happening back at the paint shop, and I'd have to be planning for the next show that was coming along. But nothing like what we did at Ken's, where you literally have. There was one year
Yeah.
where he had, I think it was 6 shows that opened within a week of each other in New York. And there was just an associate for each show, and they sat at the theater and cleaned up and set cues or did whatever needed doing while Ken went and put out the bonfire and whatever show needed the attention the most. So it was a real learning experience. For all 15 years, I still learn from Ken.
Yeah.
He's been around the block, and at this point, he's one of those designers who made the transition from conventionals to movers, and from road boards to computer consoles that do more than we ever imagined. We had this talk once about designers who couldn't make that transition wouldn't survive in the modern age, and I totally get it, and it's really true. Now, of course, like people who are watching this, they've always been movers. There have always been computer consoles and all that, so they're born into it, and it probably feels very natural for them.
Yeah, but it must be a huge shift. Like, I'm sure God knows what we're going to deal with in 20 years' time. But
Yes.
everyone lit with projectors or something crazy like that. That's great to hear about your time working for Ken. But then also you took on more responsibility, right? You started looking after lots of Chicago's and things for him. Like most of the U.S. tours and stuff, right?
Yes, we did. Oh God, let's see. I have to look this up. What year? Chicago opened in. I'm looking at my piece of paper because I literally can't do it. Oh, this is a funny one. Yeah, Chicago is probably Ken's biggest hit. The funny part is, I saw it in 1975, the original production, at the 46th Street Theater, which is what it was called then. Now it's called the Richard Rogers.
The original Bob production, right?
The original production with the original gang, and I had standing room in the back row of the orchestra. Saw it from there. The balcony from above comes down very low. So to see the top of the set, you have to get down on the floor and look under. And it was a lot of neon. Jules Fisher lit it. It was gorgeous. Unfortunately, I loved the music, but it wasn't a hit. It was up against Chorus Line and didn't get Best Musical that year. So fast forward to whatever the year this was, we did this, 1996, I guess. Ken lit it for City Center as part of the Encore series. It's one of those things where you go in on Friday and open it on Sunday. Very, very fast, mostly concert looking or whatever. It got a lot of attention. It had an incredible cast. Bebe Neuwirth, Annie Reinking, Joel Gray. A phenomenal production. And Ben Piercy had been Ken's associate on that one, but Ben couldn't take it further. Walter Bobby picked it up and moved it to Broadway. I've been the associate on it since that moved to New York, to the Rogers. We moved it. It went into the Rogers. They had a 6-month contract for the theater, and we were being kicked out after 6 months. Nobody thought it would run because the original production hadn't run. So we only had the theater for a limited time. They had a new hit musical coming in. By that point, it actually was a big hit. Chicago was a big hit again and was making pots of money. It moved to the Schubert because they wanted to bring this hit musical in that was coming in. Of course, that show flopped. Chicago kept running. At a certain point, there was a new production of Gypsy with Bernadette Peters that wanted to come in, and they wanted the Schubert Theater. So the Schuberts moved us to the Ambassador.
Right.
That production Gypsy came in and also flopped. And Chicago keeps running, and it's gone on and on and on and on and on. We did, let's see, we did 2 national tours. I was associated on that one. We did the West End production, which I should write here and see. It was, yes, we were at the Adelphi in 1997. Then it moved to the Cambridge in 2006, the Garrick in 2011, the Phoenix in 2018. And there's a UK tour that started in 2006, I think it was. And that tour is still out and about. I did it at the UK. I did Vienna, Netherlands, Tokyo. I honestly can't remember. They all mixed together.
All over.
And
All in different
this fall would be our 23rd year with it.
Wow.
And I think the most incredible part about it is I'm 68 years old. I'll say that right now. I'm older than you think I am. So 68 minus 23. I was in my 40s when we did this. We were children. And
you have a nice time around the globe.
Yeah, the show is still there. I drop by, every 6 months or so maybe, and say hi to whoever's in the cast this week and whoever the musical director is, and hang out with the crew for a bit. And I might watch a little of it, not usually. The crew takes amazing care of it, and we've had phenomenal crews in every tour we've done, with the possible exception of Lisbon. That one was a bit of a problem. But anyway.
Scratch that one off your list. Well, so we spoke to Ryan O'Gara yesterday about what it's like to recreate Hamilton everywhere and about the responsibilities and stuff. Do you mind walking us through, like, you as the associate or like assistant, however you were titled, like what are some of those responsibilities? Like, what is it that you take on? What does Ken take on? What happens when
I was going to say, well, you've already explained to everybody at some point, I assume, the difference between an assistant and an associate.
Yeah, I think
right. Okay.
That one.
So at Ken's office, and Ken puts the plot together, he does the rough. It's on a piece of yellow tracing paper, which he hands to the assistant, who's usually the office assistant, who's the full-time person there all the time around. And they do the drafting. Ken also picks channels and things. The associate steps in at some point, either in the beginning when you're talking about it creatively, or shortly thereafter, to puzzle out things like practicals, where to put things. They really come to the fore when it comes to the theater, when the designer can't be there, or you just simply need 7 sets of eyes to get the whole thing going. Most often, I wind up wrangling the follow spots. I'm relatively good at that. I haven't done 12 at once like we used to do on Stars on Ice. Right. Chicago only has 3, but it has to be 3, and they have to be on center, except for at the Adelphi where they were off center, which was a problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, you basically figure out the stuff that you can do to help the designer get along. And if Ken isn't available to do it, then you make the decisions, and you've worked with Ken long enough that you know how he would handle it. And if not, he trusts you to have enough taste to make your own judgment, and it'll be fine. It's pretty straightforward. Very often, you're the one who wrangles the initial round of paperwork, make sure it's all there and all in one piece. The assistant is responsible for getting the mountain of boxes and bundles and stuff to go to the theater and get it loaded in. I very often figure out who's sitting where and why and where and how, and then we puzzle out together how all the monitors are stacking up and that kind of thing. But my primary thing is, particularly in all these overseas productions, is to be Ken when he can't be there. And that's true of almost all of them, because although if there's a production in Australia, Ken is always there.
And Brazil. Wherever it's nice.
The UK is pretty much that way too. If he wants to be in London, he'll be in London.
Yeah, for sure.
But for instance, the Netherlands tour, Ken wasn't there and wasn't planning to be. So all anything and everything. Your job is to make sure Chicago looks like Chicago, and I know what it's supposed to look like. I don't remember cue numbers. I even have been known to sit there in the middle of it and go, I have no idea what number is next. And like, oh, that one, right. It's it's one of those that you know it so well that you don't remember it all.
Yeah,
But I know what every moment in that show is supposed to look like, and we will make it happen. The rig does change from production to production. It's funny watching Ken do this sometimes. We did a national tour that went out, I think, 2 years ago that I did at Starlight in Kansas City, which is an outdoor venue. We didn't, the sun is shining. And so we didn't see the actual lighting for, let's see, we started in the middle of the day. We started after lunch with the dancers, with everybody on stage working through the show. The lights were on and they were focused. We closed the storm door down so that we could have a dark stage to focus, but it obviously had to come up so that you could see the audience. So they started working through it. The follow spots were actually out front on in the middle of a summer afternoon. They could very vaguely see where they were going. We couldn't see any of the lighting on the stage, obviously, but we worked through it. And then after dinner, we finished Act One. So we saw the end of Act One in the dark, and so we could see what the lighting looked like. Then the next afternoon, we started Act Two in the middle of the afternoon, and we actually got through it all and had our first performance that night, which is when we saw the lighting for the first time. But it was exactly right. And Walter Bobby was there, the original director. He directed that tour, and he said, "So how do you think it went?" And I said, I think it was a really good dress rehearsal. And he said, "Yes, exactly." So indeed, the second performance was perfect in every way. We've had minimal notes because once you put the lights in the right places, they really do work every time. John DeMoose has done the associate work on a lot of the international productions. He's taken it to places like Dubai, and he will sit there and rejigger the light plot with Ken. But Ken is funny because we were just talking last week. The coronavirus thing has made things very interesting because we're actually chatting more on the phone than usual. But he was working on the UK tour, which I guess is going out again this fall or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was wondering if he could get it down. The original production had 12 electrics. And I think at the Ambassador, we're down to 8 electrics. And the tour, I think, has 8. And I think the UK tour may have 6. Yeah, and right. Ken was wondering if he could get it down to 4. And he was calling to say, "So we have the steel blue, the blue, and the red backlights. Do you think I can combine them all into one circuit because we have LED lights?" And I went, "Well, yeah, but then you don't have your little marching soldiers in the air." "Well, yeah, you do, but they're all from the same light." "Well, I guess you could." So we lose another electric. I am dying to see the day, and I know it will come, when Hamilton has a drop for the back wall instead of the solid brick. And it has 8 booms and 4 overhead electrics, and it all fits into one trailer. They all do this, and part of our job is to pare them down and make them tour and yet keep the spirit of the original working. And it's always possible. It amazes me that we can do this. They're your favorite little bits that go away, but the audience never knows the difference. The audience only knows what they show you. So, and nobody's going to remember, "Oh, I saw it in New York 4 years ago. This is just like it."
Exactly.
Yeah, it is.
I missed that one cue, that one set practical.
Yeah. Even the Flying Ground Row in Chicago, which is a big set piece. It was dictated by the scene designer. It was actually a piece of junk out of the basement at 4 Star Lighting. It was free, which is why we had it. that's been the single most difficult thing. The UK tour replaced it with the flip down front of the bandstand, which, by the way, catches fire every time I get near it. I don't know if you've seen this.
Yes, I have.
The front of the bandstand has a flipper on it that folds down, and there are lights inside that blind the audience, and then another set of lights that light up onto the performers that are just above it. And when I first saw it, my response was, well, I hope there's some way of keeping that from being lit while it's closed, because it can catch fire. And they're going, oh, no, it can't. And I noticed that there were like burn marks on it, scorch marks on the inside of the thing. And they said, no. Yeah, it happened once. We put a dead switch on it so that when that thing opens or when it closes, it cuts the circuit. And I went, oh, okay, fine. And we're focusing, and I smell something. And yes, it's gotten turned on while the thing was closed, and it was burning again. And it happened the next time I encountered that set too. So it's very funny. And speaking of, they have built more physical productions in Chicago than I can imagine. The New York tour productions, all three of the New York sets wound up as various sets. Like one was sold to Tokyo, one toured with us in Europe, and then they build more of them. It's kind of amazing that way.
Well, have you, while we're on assistants, and before we move into Lightwright, do you have any advice for young assistants and associates on how to behave or how to get work or?
Oh my God. Advice for young assistants. Find some other career. I don't know.
Move into video.
Yeah, let's see. Really, truly don't do it unless you love it. Because there are days when it's going to be really tough and you're going to hate it. And you need to come back from it. But that all comes from having an upbeat, yes, we can do this attitude. We can have fun with it. You want to meet everybody in the business, literally everybody. You have to meet friends of friends and then stay friends with the friends of friends. Go out for dinner with friends, because friends is where the work comes from. Tom Skelton once told me, after asking me to work with him for something, which actually the project fell apart, but he said, I never want to work with anybody I haven't worked with before. And I thought that was terrible. What do you mean you always want to work with the same people over and over? But now I totally understand. Once you find somebody you like to work with, you trust them, you know how they work, you can depend on them. We have very little time in the theater. It's a very demanding business. New musicals in particular rewrite themselves every other day, and scenes go from Act 1 to Act 2. They get cut, they get new musical numbers overnight. It can be very intense, and you need to have people with you who you trust and depend upon. And, in a pinch, they're going to be there for you. So that's why he always wanted to work with somebody he worked with before, because he didn't have to worry about that person. So to get a job with that person, you have to get them to trust you. And that can be by doing anything. Can I come watch you focus one day? And that's when you first meet them. And then maybe, yes, you go get coffee or whatever. And then bit by bit, you work with them, and they stay your friend. And this applies too, by the way, to choreographers, directors, all those people, because those are the ones who get us work.
Yeah.
Directors, choreographers, general managers. They're the ones that get us work. The general manager likes the person who always comes in on budget and time and they can depend on them. And if the director doesn't have any particular choice, then the producer will make the choice for them, or the choreographer will make the choice. Very often it's the choreographer, pushes that stuff. But it's a very social business, and you need to be a social animal.
In a way.
Even if you're the shy type, and some designers really are. Not everyone is outgoing and that way, but they care. They are brilliant lighting designers. They consider every possibility and which is the best. They have really great working relationships with their directors, and those directors will be faithful to them. And, like Don Holder had, I don't know that he had lit any big musicals until Lion King and Julie Taymor, and he got along, but he'd worked with Julie Taymor for years. So lo and behold, now he likes musicals, lots of big musicals. You never really know where your career is going to go, but you kind of hang in there and it goes. I have a opinion which may not be the most popular one in the world, but it's my theory, is that eventually everyone gets the career they really want, whether they know it or not. Because when you get up in the morning, what do? You put your pants on, and then you call your friends and go out for lunch. Do you call a director friend and see how they are, whatever? Who do you communicate with? Do you go to a trade show and see what equipment is, or do you go visit your family? You, without knowing it, make unconscious decisions every day, all the time, that drive your career. And the hard part is turning those into conscious decisions to drive your career. I had a friend once who was the general manager for a ballet company, and she was also, she sold cars at a car dealer. And the ballet company was not a big fancy one or anything else. And at one point, somebody asked her, "Oh, what do you do?" She, "Oh, I'm the business director for the ballet." And the person on the other end knew she sold cars. She said, "No, you're not. You're a car dealer." And Kathy was like, "What?" But yeah, the reality was she made her living selling cars. The ballet didn't have enough money for that, but she did it. But it was really her side gig. So we all do this all the time, and I've done it in my career. I had not lit a lot of dance until I started lighting dance, and I loved lighting dance. I wound up lighting Nutcracker for School of the Arts. God knows, if you don't like Nutcracker, don't be a lighting designer. But Lightwright started to happen, and then you find yourself, oh, I'm going to work on that feature, or this needs fixing, or somebody calls with a bug, and so you pay attention to that instead of calling Harris, your director friend. And that career begins to shift. So it'll happen without you knowing it. And, where you wind up may not have anything to do with where you are now. We have a lot of students at NYU who are wondering what on earth they're going to do with the whole industry shut down with coronavirus. And I don't know. And we'll see what everybody does. It's a mystery, I think is the famous phrase.
Yeah, it's a great advice though. You get the career you deserve. That's what you say, wasn't it? That's great. Yeah. Well, shall we get on to Lightwright now?
Dear God, must we?
Do you want to take a little break? We've been out for 40. We take a little 5-minute break.
It's up to you. I'm game.
Yeah, let's go for it. People can pee in their own time. Okay. So do you want to tell us what existed before Lightwright? Before we even start to put our heads around it, how Lightwright?
Yes. I don't know how you do this. Can you show them the Pauline Koner hookup? Yes. It's only one page. It's just a picture I took of it with my iPhone. But this is handwritten paperwork, and certainly it's not the oldest. Ken has examples. The Performing Arts Library has examples from the 20s and 30s. But you'll notice, among other things, there's no channel column on this because it wasn't computer consoles at that point. It was still, road boards, the one sort of other 3-scene presets, whatever it happened to be. This was for Pauline Koner, a company that I lit for years, but I had standard paperwork forms that were Xeroxed, and then you had to fill it all in by hand. It's a lot of writing and a lot of pencil work. Now, this was not a very big show. It was 6 pages of paperwork. It was maybe 200 lights. That was sort of average for the time. This is at Brooklyn College, Whitman Hall, which is a big theater at Brooklyn College. So it might have been 300 lights. I don't offhand have a count. And because it's in paper, it's very hard to count.
You gotta do it yourself. Yeah.
Yes, you have to do it yourself. And I didn't do focus charts at this point. I didn't know about focus charts. I had paperwork that basically said, well, the pools are, at center, quarter, and left a quarter or whatever. And because I was with the show all the time, it was very easy to put everything where I wanted it. And I just knew the stuff. When I got introduced to how the real world worked, I discovered, oh yes, we need focus charts because the designer's not going to be here and the show's going to run for 6 years or even for 3 weeks. In 3 weeks the light burns out and you have to break focus to get to the lamp to change it. And the light has to go back where it is. And you need a chart to say that. And I discovered over the years that the paperwork has to be not only accurate, but how do I use the word? Clear. There was a Ken did a tour of Lettuce and Lovage. He lit the original New York production of it. It had, I think, 3 sets. And one of the sets was sort of like the interior of a castle, sort of. It had a big set of stairs, like 12 steps higher at least. And I had seen the New York production, but I didn't work on it. But however many years later, Ken couldn't go out with the tour. The tour had been out already, and it was going back out again, and he needed somebody to go back out and put it together. So because we had all this paperwork, it's very straightforward. You go in and you do what the paperwork says. Put the light where the focus chart says where it goes. The cues are in the board. You can look at it, clean up whatever needs cleaning up. However, the charts said 4th step as the place to stand to focus the light. And I looked at it and went, 4th step, okay. Oh, is that 4th from the bottom or 4th from the top? Nothing told me. So I asked Susie Corden, who was the stage manager. She was the PSM on the tour that had just gone out and was coming back again. And she couldn't remember. And Ken wasn't available. So I said, okay, we're going to start making the 4th step from the bottom. And you start focusing, and then you get to the one light that couldn't make its shot. And you go, aha, okay. This light would have made its shot if we counted from the top down.
Right.
So then I added the note to the paperwork for steps starting numbered at 1 down to the top, whatever. So paperwork is a huge deal, and it has to be really clear and complete. And these days, back in the Pauline Conard years, when 200 or 300 lights was as most as you had, a big Broadway show would have 300 lights. Now, Moulin Rouge coming in, nobody can tell me how many lights there are. Well, Tim, you got, somebody had a count of it.
Oh, I think the ETC people told me at one point that it's around 85,000 parameters on the console.
Right.
So it's a lot of gear.
Nick Sawing was the associate, just said it's uncountable numbers of bulbs.
Yeah.
Which is a lot what it feels like. But I know there were like 1,200 park hands and 146 movers. And the volume of that kind of stuff you just can't do with the hand stuff. You could have 10 assistants, writing like medieval scribes for hours. It would never happen. It just wouldn't.
No.
And do you know how easy it is to, here on Dimmer 49, there's Lee 152, 834, and R54. Okay, we don't have any 834. We're going to switch everything to Lee. So now I need to go through and change all of the 834s on this to whatever the Lee choice was. Oh, and by the way, this is the hookup. We also have the instrument schedule. So we have to go over and write it over there, too. And,
and on the light plot, maybe.
Maybe on the light plot, who knows? I mean, Broadway light plots tend not to put that stuff on it.
Yeah, sure.
In the old days, the light plot for Broadway had a symbol for the light and a unit number, and that was it. Because frankly, to write the color on every one of them and then have to change it, you literally, erased holes in the paper. At Ken's office, we finally switched to drafting on plastic, Mylar, because you could erase it easily. But it smears when you rub your hand across it accidentally. It smears, so you have to draft with your fingers with your arms above the surface. But
and hopefully it's not too humid out or something like that.
Exactly. Well, yeah, the Mylar was not a problem. Where if it's humid, yes, tracing paper gets damp and you can't draft on it, and it becomes a horror. So anyway, so all in the middle of all this, it became obvious that there needed to be a solution for it. And while touring with Pauline, I was writing by hand for like the 100th time, redoing the hookup, because every college we went to had different equipment. Some had what they called Fresnels. Uh, and by the way, you use the word Fresnels if that's what they call them, because that's communication skill. And so you had to rewrite it every week. And the dancers were out at the beach, and I was stuck in the hotel room and rewriting the paperwork. So I said, an idiot could do this, a computer could do this. And I went to the local shopping mall and looked at Macs and they had the Radio Shack, had the TRS-80, and they had a programming language, and they said you could write your own programs with it. And it had a bookkeeping program, more importantly. So I bought the thing, got the scene painting business to pay for it. It was $3,000 in 1979, which if you translate to American dollar, to current, is something like close to $10,000. I don't know how I ever made that happen, but obviously we were doing very well. So this is another case of, your career goes where you make it go without realizing it. I brought this thing home and I started teaching myself how to write code. And when the basic language wasn't fast enough, I saw examples of assembler language that you could use. And so I taught myself assembler using books and stuff. And I started writing this thing. And the Radio Shack computer was big and bulky, and I had a big road box built that, went with the show. But it saved my butt. I had the printer with me and everything else. And you did what you had to do to get it out the door, as it were. So anyway, I was using it, and I saw an article in Theater Crafts magazine that Roscoe was going to sell a software program somebody had written that would do lighting paperwork. And I read the description and I went, mine does better than that. That's ridiculous. So I called Bob Saturn, who was the head of software stuff or marketing or something at Roscoe, and told him about it. And he said, well, if you could make it work on the IBM PC, which was brand new then, I think we could probably sell it. So I've done a lot of things in my career. I was also teaching at SUNY Stony Brook at that point, and I borrowed the tech director's PC and wrote on it at night what became the first PC version of ALD, and the name became ALD. So Roscoe started selling it. They did okay. It was early years. Nobody knew that this was going to be a big thing or not or whatever. It eventually, word of mouth began to spread. The union exam thing opened a lot of eyes. When Ken hired me, he had already heard about this program, but he had his own program. It was on a CPM system, which had I think they were 8-inch floppy disks. They were huge.
Oh, yeah.
And we used that in the office for all of his paperwork. And I used my program for the shows that I was doing, because I was still working on my shows while still working at Ken's. And there was a famous night. Ken was doing a new Hal Prince musical called Grind. And I had drafted the light plot, and I had already sort of, I guess, made a mark and done one of the things that a designer will depend on an associate or even a smart draftsman to do, which was I discovered that the show had 4 turntables around the perimeter of the stage and one giant one in the middle, 36-foot diameter one. And the 4 turntables on the sides had units on them that were like 26 feet tall. And they not only turned, they also tracked on and off stage. And it went to Baltimore, actually with scenery on, I think it was 3-inch centers.
Wow.
Which is ridiculous. Yes, they cut half the scenery because you can't fly pipes on 3-inch centers.
No.
But it came back to New York. So there were a lot of changes going on. And I noticed that none of these turntable towers could go off stage, because on Broadway there are things called jumps, which are the cement things that poke out on either side, where equipment's stored. Is very often where the dimmers and things are. Basically, there was they couldn't go there, and nobody had noticed this. The carpenter, the scene designer, Ken, nobody. I noticed it and fixed it. So I guess I'd sort of become the go-to person, but I wasn't in the theater with it. I wasn't the associate. I was working in the office all the time. I was still doing architectural. But the famous night, Ken would come back to the office at night, and we'd sit there and type in the changes to the hookup and stuff, whatever had happened that day. And in the middle of it all, we changed I don't remember what it was. We changed one entry to another. Maybe we changed a purpose to wreath. And suddenly all of the lights that were no color, their color was changed to wreath. Uh-oh. And we're like, oh my God. So there was no undo. So we changed the color wreath back to no color, which by the way involved going to every light that used it. And lo and behold, all the purposes that were wreath changed to no color. Clearly the data was a wreck internally and couldn't be fixed. And this is a show in tech rehearsals on Broadway. We need it now. So Ken says, do you have your computer with you? And could your software do this? And I said, yes. And it was a luggable, compact, like a big sewing machine size thing. Hold it out, and Ken and I spent the next 2 hours transcribing everything into what was then ALD. And printed new paperwork. And that was the last time we used Ken's system for anything. I finally convinced him to buy an IBM AT, which caught fire the day it arrived at the office. So that was...
What is with you and fire?
It's a little nuts. But anyway, that was the beginning of history, I guess.
And at this point, were you selling it as well? Was Roscoe was selling?
Roscoe was selling ALD. Going to Ken's office, I learned how the Broadway folks worked, that we needed focus charts, how they needed to be drawn, all of the stuff, particularly what electricians need, because, the Broadway production electrician is really the one who implements everything you do. And if that paperwork isn't there and it isn't clear, and if you can't make decisions when he needs decisions made, the whole show suffers. So the paperwork needs to be not only what the lighting designer does, but what the electrician does. And from that came the Lightwright concept of layouts, where, we have the same database, but I need my paperwork to have a different set of columns on it than the electrician does. And it needs to be in a different order. And no, I don't want to see all that stuff. In the Pauline Koner hookup, there's a column for circuit. That would be filled in when it's all hung and going up in the air. As a designer, I don't have any use for that. The electrician, absolutely. So I became much more aware of how it needed to behave. So ALD turned into ALD Pro, which unfortunately had a name a lot like Alpo, the dog food.
Oh. Yeah. What did ALD stand for?
Assistant Lighting Designer.
Okay.
Actually, the first name when I first started working on it was Electric Assistant.
Oh, okay.
Which is probably the most unimaginative name you can come up with, but I'll also say that ALD isn't much more creative. So I guess it was ALD Pro. Let's see. Oh, no, actually. Anyway, at some point, Craig Miller, who was an incredible lighting designer, passed away, unfortunately, during the AIDS time, had a Mac, and he wanted a Mac version of Lightwright. Until this point, it was Windows. It was DOS only. It wasn't even Windows. So I wrote a version for the Mac that became ALD Pro, I think it was, on the Mac side, and it was still DOS on the Windows side. And then we decided it needed a new name when it became fully graphical for both Windows and Mac. And we came up with a long list of 30 or 40 possible names. And we all sat around in the office one day and kind of voted, which name made the most sense or whatever. And we wound up with Lightwright. It was unique. It was like being a playwright, but for lighting design.
Yeah.
And so it stuck, and it's been a good one. And that was, it's been around forever. I think the big change happened in, let me see what year. Oh, Lightwright 5, 2009, when we got data exchange with Vectorworks.
Right.
We had been using MiniCAD for a long time at Ken's office. Once we got away from drafting on plastic, we used MiniCAD because we were doing a lot of big architectural projects. They changed every week. They'd move walls 6 feet to the left. They'd put in a closet where we thought there was going to be, room for dimmers. So you had a lot of rejiggering to do. And MiniCAD turned into Vectorworks. And I, for a long time, had wanted to make a connection between the two because to get the data back and forth, you had to say, okay, I'm going to work in Vectorworks. And you would put your lights on, and you'd put in as much data as you wanted to there. And then you would save it, and you would export the data into another little text file or whatever. And then you'd open Lightwright, and you'd import all that data. And then you would work on it in Lightwright. But you couldn't go back to Vectorworks because you made a change over there. Now you've got changes in both places, and who's right? And that doesn't work. So you had to be very disciplined. And I am not very disciplined. So I'd be, okay, I've got the paperwork open in Lightwright, and I'll be making 3 changes. I'll go, oh, right, I forgot to move that light over 6 feet. And I would jump over to MiniCAD or Vectorworks and move the light over a foot. And I say, right, and it really needs to be channel 62, not 63. And then I go back to Lightwright and go, I just screwed myself because there's no way to do this. So anyway, yeah, you'd have to write and remember what it was you changed in each one because if you're just taking all the data, it's going to wipe out the other data when you move it over. So anyway, there was an LDI where one of the Vectorworks people and I sat down in the food area and came up with a way to do data exchange using the XML file as a way to get data back and forth. And it required huge amounts of work on Vectorworks side because they had to re-engineer vast amounts of how the inside of the program worked so that every time you made a change, it would automatically make that change in the XML file. And also that it would read the XML file when it got the focus and bring the data back in. So many thanks are due to Vectorworks on that one. And that has sort of cemented them as the industry standard as a result because they're the only one that does this. I've had a lot of inquiries from people who use AutoCAD and such things. But the reality is AutoCAD doesn't have all that engineering on the inside to make that kind of thing possible. There's nobody that we're a very small business. There aren't very many people in the theater world, no matter what you think. So it's not a big enough industry compared to construction or architectural design or designing the space shuttle, I'm sure, which is all done in AutoCAD or whatever. So we're not a big enough industry for AutoCAD itself, Autodesk, to pay any attention to us.
Yeah.
And there haven't been any developers that I know of that have been able to make something like this happen. When it first came out, I had a number of people come by the booth at LDI who wanted to know, could we do this on AutoCAD? And I said, if you're really good at Lisp, maybe Lisp being the language you use in AutoCAD, maybe there's a way you can do it. And to my knowledge, nobody's ever done it. Nobody certainly ever asked me for changes to accommodate AutoCAD. We just use Vectorworks and we use Lightwright. So that's really how that part all came to be, and it's taken over my life. I won't say this is a secret or anything, but I've basically retired as a lighting designer. I still do Chicago or whatever when it comes along. If Ken needs somebody to go to the hole in the wall gang and put it together, I'll be happy to do that anytime. But my income is from Lightwright these days, and it supports me. Well, it did until the coronavirus arrived, where nobody is working and nobody's buying Lightwright. So we're all in the same boat.
Well, hopefully some people listening in are going to go and buy Lightwright after this.
Yeah. Well, there have been some sales in the last month. Universities and things are taking this time to update their software, and people who are using Lightwright 5 are finding that, if they're on a Mac, they can't run it because it's 32-bit. And so they need Lightwright 6. And so there have been some sales. But even last month, which was a record month for coronavirus months, the first month was $136. That's how much I made. Last month was considerably above that. So,
well, that's good.
I'm hoping it will continue into the fall, and we'll see.
And a few from different industries too. Weren't you telling me the other day? Film and TV people are starting to bite and get into it.
Yes, David Kane, who's a gaffer on films, he's doing the Macbeth with Denzel Washington right now. They just went back into production. Contacted me, and his wife Hilda Kane is a theatrical lighting designer, and he'd be doing all this work. He's saying, "Why aren't you using Lightwright for this?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a theater thing. It doesn't know it anyway." So he got into it, and he got together a group with Local 728 in LA, and we did a class a couple weeks ago that had 50-something people, all over gaffers, TV and film people, some rigging gaffers, just all kinds of people. And they had their first introduction to Lightwright. And it was explaining to them things like, they were baffled by the word position. What is the position column? And I go, it in the theater, we all know what it means. It's hanging screws, first electric, second electric, whatever.
Maybe you just put a crane there. Do whatever you want.
Right. But, it basically just tells you where to look for the light.
Mm.
So if you want to say it's on truss 4, or it's on the roof of the building, or it's in the kitchen, or, whatever, it's a way of going, oh, that's where we're looking at it. And they began to go, oh, okay, we get it, and we'll see. And yes, I made a couple sales off that one, which is good. But more importantly, it spread the news a little bit. And so we'll see where it goes.
Well, what can we look for next in Lightwright? Where is it going to go next? You got big plans? Anything exciting you can talk about?
There's nothing exciting I can talk about, because if I talk about it, then everybody's going to go, oh my God, Lightwright 7 is going to be ready next week, and when can I get it? And no, it takes years to make it.
You have people that help you. No, it's not just...
it's just me. I write code, I write the documentation, I do everything. I have had people in the past do various amounts of documentation. I have a friend who works up at BU who has organized it. I'll take the documentation and make changes to it as I make changes to the software, and then he'll take it and clean it up and make it look like a grown-up did it, which is great, because he's really good at that and I'm terrible at it. But I'm the only one that does all the coding, and that takes centuries. I don't know when there will be a Lightwright 7. I do know that I have 40 pages of feature requests from people. There's a lot more that I want it to do. I personally would love for it to handle follow spots, wrangling them in a rather completely different way than anything anybody else has done. But nobody else has really asked for that. That's my own thing. There's literally been no request from anyone. So obviously, all those of you who wrote software programs that do follow spots, I think you're safe. Unless I get a bee in my bonnet, we'll see. But anyway, that would also require multi-user Lightwright, because you're having more than one person at the production table with Lightwright running, and one's ringing the follow spots, and the other is doing the paperwork, and the other one is doing groups and stuff. So I don't know about that. I know there are other console manufacturers that would like to talk to Lightwright. ETC was early to the game, and again has done a lot of work for it. We still have some issues to deal with in version 3, but they're getting there. Those other manufacturers, some of them have backed out when they realize how much work is going to be involved on their part to talk. Right. But when I added the feature of Lightwright talking directly to the EOS consoles, my big thing was groups, because I use groups a lot, and I hate writing them out, and I thought it would be easy to create them in Lightwright, and then can we just send them to the console? And it turns out, that's a really easy way to do it. But a lot of people were concerned that the union would not be happy with this, because basically then I would be running the console by telling Lightwright to make groups. And at least in New York, you have to be very careful about that because
Yeah.
no, designers don't touch the console. I've been known to.
Come across and snip the wire.
Yeah. Well, they just stand behind you and give you a look, and you go, "Oh yeah, I'm just fixing that. Oh, thank you." um,
So do you
but
think that? Oh, sorry, you go.
yeah, but it turns out everybody hates typing groups.
Hmm.
I first showed the feature at a training session for IATSE Local 1 in New York, and they were cheering. Oh my God, we hate that. And the designer is always very picky about uppercase and lowercase and spelling on the group name and all this. And you know, and the electricians are there with their fingers like this trying to type into things. And so they loved having it just zip over. And I, as designer, even if they create like the complicated groups and things in the console now, to suck it back into Lightwright and have a printed documentation for it that I can look at or take to the next show, it's totally obvious to me. So I'm hoping for some more features like that. But, you know, it seems every time I do a Lightwright that I've done everything you could think of to do. And I make it do as many of those things as I can humanly make it do. And then the day it comes out, somebody is going to say, well, why didn't it do this? And I go, oh my God, well, there's the list for Lightwright 8.
I need more than universes or whatever it is.
Oh my God, there's no shortage for number of universes. There are, 24 user fields in Lightwright, and it used to be like 6.
Yeah.
And the electricians are saying, well, could you give me another couple dozen? And I'm going, really? And they're saying, or can't you just do like Vectorworks and make it like any number of user fields? And I'm going, oh my God, we're going to need a supercomputer before we're through. It's one of those. But my focus right now, believe it or not, is, well, besides trying to fix bugs, which are always present, and no piece of software on the planet is without them.
Yeah.
Remember that the next time you fly, and you know the plane is run by software. I need, and Billington is very worried about this. Lightwright needs to continue beyond my lifetime or my ability to actually code. It's getting harder for me to type on the computer. It takes me longer than it should to do a lot of coding these days. So what I'm trying to do is find people who are interested in coding, who know something about the theater business, certainly about the lighting business. And there isn't money for it at this point, but I have an idea for how to restructure all of this so that maybe there is money to help pay for the people to write the code. There also needs to be somebody to replace me at some point with the vision, and can become the public face of it, to show it at trade shows, or maybe there's several people that take turns at it and get together as a group and say, well, here's what Lightwright should do next. Or here's, what we should spin off as a separate program, for instance. So I haven't yet figured out how to make that happen. I haven't sent out newsletters or anything to the world about that. But I've been asking friends, do you know anybody? Are you interested? I've had a couple of electrician types who are now completely out of work say, I used to do coding. That might be interesting. And I go, well, if you want to do this, let me know. But, when Broadway beckons again in January, February, March, whatever year it may be, you're not going to want to run away. And they go, right. So we'll see.
Okay, that's fascinating.
But that's as much as I can say about the future because I don't know. There's no knowing these things.
Well, and it's exciting just to hear that more integration is coming, and more and more of these things are all going to start to talk to each other, I guess.
Yes, I did tell Tim about one little thing that's coming along, but it's not written yet. It's not out there yet. So, and it's going to have to be in Lightwright 6, which is unfortunate because then people won't pay for it. But anyway, sorry. Don't mind me. I just need the money to pay for the house and the dog. Oh, the dogs.
We haven't even talked about the dogs yet.
I didn't give you pictures of dogs.
No.
Hang
is there
on,
one nearby?
Dewey. Here it is.
So John used to always tell me about, you used to bring the dogs to tech, right? Or some techs anyway. You'd have to bring a dog.
Yes, and actually there was a Lightwright training class at Williamstown some years ago that just surfaced on my Facebook page.
Yeah, I saw that picture today.
With a picture of me and the two dogs. And a former NYU student of mine who was an intern at Williamstown at that point texted me saying, I was at that thing. So anyway,
Hello.
For all you Corgi fans out there, this is Dewey.
Hey, Dewey.
Hold still. Here we go. He's just a year old. We got him last September. He's a sweetie pie. We also have an older Corgi, Tally. She's the queen of the brood here. She's 11, so she's much more sedate than he is. He's a little over the top. What he does do is love to watch videos on TV.
Oh, really?
Yes. The other night we were watching Vikings, the series.
Yeah.
And we knew Dewey watches TV. He literally will sit there and watch the TV. And this person or something came up from under the water, and he literally, his fur went up and he started barking at the screen, and we're going, what is it? He didn't like that scary thing. And there was another thing I'd seen where somebody came on screen with a really angry face, and he barked at that. He's very attuned to people and faces.
Yeah, wow, that's unusual, isn't it?
Yeah. So
well,
anyway,
that's so great. Thank you for sharing all of this. It's so much information, and it's so good to hear your story. And it's amazing to hear how you honed in on something in the industry that needed fixing, and you went about and you fixed it. If you're okay to hang around for some questions, I'm sure everyone has lots of questions for you. But also, do you want to take like a little 2-minute, 3-minute break before you do that?
One thing I will say before we take a break, a quick little break would be nice, is just a few things that I think skills that people need to have. And I know you're going to hate this. Drafting is number one. Drafting is what everybody hates doing. It needs to be done because it's the only way we can communicate to the electricians where we really want things put and how we want them made. And so everybody's always looking for assistance to draft. Yeah. And I've told my students in the coronavirus time, there are still architectural projects going on. So if you know of any designers who are doing architectural, hit them up for assisting work. That's one of those skills that can translate to anything. And it doesn't have to be theater. It can be architecture. It can be faith-based things. It can be almost anything that requires drafting. Communication skills, if I haven't already said it, are a really big deal. And by the way, did I mention the business is really, really small? I think I did. Everybody knows everybody. And that is literally true, not just figuratively. I was on the union exam committee some years ago, and an applicant came along, and her resume said that she had assisted Ken Billington on the Riverside Dance Festival gala. And I read this. The applicant's outside the room when we get the resumes. And I read that, and I went, that's not Ken's show. I designed that. Ken never done the Riverside Dance Festival in his life. I love the gala. Who is this person? I didn't have an assistant. And we looked at the rest of the resume, and it finally dawned on me, oh my God, this must be the person. We called Production Arts Lighting at 4 p.m, the day of the gala. We needed one more person to help change gel during the breaks between pieces. They sent this person over. She changed gel and did dimmer patch switches for us. And somehow on her resume, it turned into an associate to Ken Billington. Wow. Needless to say, she did not get in the union. So don't lie. Don't ever lie. Maybe embroider a little bit, but no, you can't lie.
Don't lie.
And this is usually something I'd say at the very end, but because we're going to do a Q&A afterwards. What the definition of a good assistant is someone you can go to dinner with. Yeah. I heard this first from Jane Greenwood. I think every designer I know now says the same thing. At dinner break or lunch break, who are you going to dinner with? The director, The designer might go with the director once or twice. The rest of the time, you're going to have a meal with your associates and assistants. So you better be a good conversationalist and keep everybody happy. And yes, you can talk shop, but you can't just sit there and be boring. You can't be on your phone like this while the designer's trying to, be cheery. So it's one of those things.
Yeah.
Tom Skelton's theory was when somebody walks in the door at the theater, they need to be able to tell who the designer is immediately, as opposed to a stagehand. And in those days, of course, the designers were wearing a sport coat. Tommy wore a turtleneck. Ken would wear a tie and a blazer. We all wore the same thing. There was a day we were doing the Red Shoes, Broadway musical in New York, where we went to lunch. We came back, and the sound crew had gotten clothes to match ours, and we're all sitting at the lighting production table. And you could tell which one of us was which based on the clothes they were wearing. So we were really zinged. But it made a point too, which is, yes, that's what the lighting gangs look like. These days, everybody is way more casual. Nobody wears ties. We're all very cool about it. But there should be a little something that says you're a designer, not a crew guy. It's one of those. But, it really comes down to being communicative with everybody and having manners. Just having manners is a big deal. So,
well, that's great.
On that note, we could take our break and come back.
Yes, thank you so much. Everyone have a quick little pee and think about what you want to ask Mr. McKernon, and we'll be back here in 2 minutes.
Cool.
So, John, some questions from our lovely participants. What are your thoughts on the new Apple chip, the ARM processors? Does that mean you're gonna have to change everything, or a new version of Lightwright has to come out? What does that mean?
Believe it or not, Lightwright's written in a language called Xojo, Xojo, which is cross-platform Mac Windows, object-oriented. It's sort of based on BASIC. It is internally, but anyway, I don't have to worry about what platform Apple does it on. Xojo will make whatever changes they need to under the hood. They, on a technical level, they use a thing called the LLVM compiler, which is a international standard for how these things work, and it will simply recompile the code into something that runs on it natively. It should be just simple as flipping a switch and rebuilding. And if you believe that, I have a bridge I can sell you in Brooklyn. But theoretically, they have already done some builds on the native Apple soft hardware, and it seems to be fine.
So Dean asks, I don't understand any of that, by the way. So Dean asks, is there anything else, given the chance, in the lighting industry that you would like to change? Anything in the lighting world?
Anything else in the lighting world that you'd like to change?
This is a response to you, like innovating paperwork. Is there anything else that you would want to innovate?
Oh, I was going to say the thing I'd like to do is get rid of 10 out of 12s.
Yeah, right. Well, it's going to
any of those you don't know, that's when you have a day where you work 10 hours out of 12, and typically that means starting rehearsals at 11 and going till 11 at night, and it is horrible because, among other things, your lunch break is at
10.
Well, you either have to have lunch before you start at 11, or which means 10 in the morning, which is breakfast, or you have it at 4 in the afternoon, and then when do you have dinner? But anyway, as far as software and the lighting industry, I just wish everybody talked to each other more. I'm very excited by the new DMX Universal thing. I think we've been using DMX way past its expiration date, but I'm happy that they're coming up with a way for it to talk more easily and to allow you to talk to more than one DMX network at a time. I can't remember the name of it. RDM, not RDM net. That's something else. RDM, something else I would love to have made simpler for me to use at some point.
Yeah.
People write little plug-in tools. That'd be helpful. We'll see. One of my ultimate goals, which has still not been realized, and I've wanted this for 20 years, and it's only because I see what the electricians do in the electric shop, is, here's the equipment list. Now they have to get the equipment pulled together. They label it, and that was something big that came in Lightwright 6 was the labels. I mean, I could spin the label part of Lightwright off and have a whole nother program, and maybe I will do that. That everybody could use, not just theater people. But anyway, they label the equipment. They need to configure it. They need to pick channels for it and dimmer numbers and DMX, all that stuff. And I've always wanted it just be to be able to bring the light in here, plug it in, and then say, "Hi, who are you?" And the light goes, "Oh, hello, I'm here." And I'm talking to Lightwright, and I say, "Okay, now you're channel 24, and I need you with this profile." Great, done, and this address. And you don't have to diddle with dip switches or with any configuration utilities or anything else to make this happen. It ought to just be obvious. And the technology for that exists, but it's been difficult because like DMX Cat, which is a great little tool, in its current state, as I recall, only does one universe at a time. And so they're all universe 1, as it were. And what I really need to be able to pull a light is it's universe 12, and its address is 34. And then that all needs to be on a common network somehow so that it all hangs together. Now, that also means if the network software goes down, then the whole rig goes down. But, yeah. I don't know if people watching know this, but it's become sort of standard practice, at least in New York, for each electric to be on its own universe. Because that way, if the universe does go down, you only lose one pipe of lights, not half the rig.
Yeah.
And I guess universes are cheap these days.
They grow on trees, John. You got how many can you have in Lightwright now? Unlimited?
Oh my God! Yeah, I have a universe tree out back. Yeah, it needs pruning.
So I gave a little introductory demo yesterday to everybody, but tell us where is best to go learn more basics or more of the advanced stuff that Lightwright can do? Is there like good online resources?
I wish I could say, oh yes, of course. There's a 20-step tutorial. There are lesson plans for university courses. All of those are things that somebody ought to make. I would think if I was teaching something in school that it would be a good thing to have to go. Oh yes, here's project number 1 for week 1 or whatever, and go from there. The reality is not a lot. There's a lot in Lightwright's help menu. There's the reference manual, which has, God help me, 200 and something odd pages of stuff. You can read that cover to back.
It's pretty searchable. If you want to look at like data exchange, it explains that all in there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole chapter on that, and it's very informative. There is a tutorial that comes with Lightwright. It is excessively boring because basically it takes you through, 12 ways to add lights, 12 ways to edit lights. There's so many different ways of doing everything in Lightwright that it's very hard to say, here is the way to do it. And if I say that, then I like doing it this other way. So it makes it hard to teach Lightwright, frankly. I go through this all the time where, well, Tim, you had your hour-and-a-half class or whatever, and how far can you get through it? I did the training class for the film people, and that was 3 hours, and we barely touch the surface of it. I do 8-hour training classes for Local 1 New York, and they come out exhausted at the end of the day because we're just plowing through it to try and get far enough to do labels, and that's the dessert, as it were. So I wish there was more, but it takes time, and somebody has to write it, and they have to know the product really well, and they have to have a good grasp of the English language and spelling and punctuation and all that stuff.
The tutorials that you just mentioned, though, the one that you said comes with Lightwright, where do they access that from? The help menu, or is that online?
I believe it's under the help menu. There's a lot of stuff also in Lightwright under the resources menu.
Okay.
There are various things there, including more quirky pictures.
Right. And I found there's stuff on YouTube as well. There's some really good YouTube channels actually that have
Yeah, a
demo.
couple of those. Yeah, yeah.
But
And by the way, if you want to see my design work, that's also at McKernon.com. I think also under resources, which is sort of a funny place to put it, but whatever. There's some pretty pictures.
hey, Tom is asking about the student license of Lightwright that he has.
Yeah.
Is there a watermark on the student version, or is the only catch the 3-year limit?
The student version is exactly the same as the regular one, but it runs out after 3 years. There is no other difference. There's no watermarks. There's no limits to how many you can do or anything. There is it without any kind of license. Lightwright runs in demo mode, which is up to 75 lights, including, by the way, any that are deleted, because it cuts your internal storage, whatever it is, down to 75. But it's fully featured, so you can do it. If you do a little show, you don't even need a license for it. But the student license, yeah, it's just 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, if you're still in school, God help you, you can buy another student license and go for another 3 years. The only thing is the paperwork will say the word student before your name on the printed paperwork. At the end of your career as a student, you can buy an upgrade from the student version to a personal version. And it's basically just the price difference between what the student license cost and what the personal one costs.
And this all is through suppliers, right? Like City Theatrical is your main one, or White Light here in London.
It goes through City Theatrical dealers, and White Light is a City Theatrical dealer. There's a City Theatrical office in London. You can also buy it from them. One thing to know is if you buy it direct from a City Theatrical office as opposed to a City Theatrical dealer, you'll pay list price for it. The dealer may give you a discount, depends on how much they like you, or if they're offering a promotion or whatever. I know companies like Production Advantage have online websites, and they offer Lightwright at a discount. So I always say, pay as you shop around. I make the exact same amount of money no matter where you buy it from. The royalty is not based on how much you pay for it.
Lydia might know a few programmers and things. How can they get in touch with you? Coders and things through the email on the Lightwright website.
Help at McKernon.com is a great place.
Great.
Or my personal email address, jmck at McKernon.com. But help at McKernon.com is easy to remember.
Nina asked, would you consider making Lightwright workable with newer drafting programs that have come up recently, such as Drafty?
Drafty's high on my list. I know Drafty wants to do it. It's a matter of getting it together and figuring out how to do it. It's complicated because Drafty is online and Lightwright is on your desktop. So Lightwright would need to talk to the online server or whatever and get that data back and forth. It's mostly a logistical thing. Drafty's also much looser in terms of types of things you can type in. You can type in important as a channel number if you want to. It isn't a number, but it'll let you type it in. Whereas Lightwright is very strongly typed. It wants a number for that channel number because that's what matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's one of them.
Great. A few links here. People are sharing about where to get better training and stuff. Yesterday I gave them 2 little musicals that I did a long time ago, and they could pull the information off the drawing and stuff into Lightwright. Does anybody have any questions that came up from that they'd like to ask John while he's here? Because he can help you a lot better than I can, I'm sure. Well, you had lots of questions for me yesterday.
You can't be shy and be in the theater business.
Never, no. Stick to sculpting or fine art if that's what you want to do.
Yes. But that's, you know what it is? There's nothing they need to know. We've told them everything there is to know in the world.
That must be it. Well, yeah. Hey, why don't we finish off then? Do you want to tell us about what you were doing when Broadway shut down, or when Theater World shut down?
When the Theater World shut down, it was actually sort of funny. I teach at NYU in the Tisch Graduate School for Design. God, the name of the department is complicated. I can't remember it right. The Tisch School of the Arts, Department of Graduate Design for Film and Theater. I teach Vectorworks and how to draft light plots. As I tell the students, the focus is on how to draft a Broadway-style light plot using Vectorworks, with Vectorworks being the least important part of that. So we don't learn anywhere near the whole program. But it's a whole lot of drafting light plots and comparing why one is readable and the other is not, why dimensions matter, why you can have too many dimensions, all that kind of stuff. So when everything shut down, we got word on March 11th, I think it was, that the last class of the semester before spring break was going to be March 13th. And on the 11th, we got word that students would have the option of taking our classes remotely on the 13th or in person. And obviously class had been in person up until that point. We'd meet and we'd put our drawings up on the walls and talk through them. And then we'd go into the computer and look at them and see what, was wrong internally, too many classes that are baffling or whatever it was. So that was the Wednesday. I made arrangements. I mean, I was in New York, so I said, okay, I'm going to have some students online. We had one who was in China, and he wanted to take it remotely. There were 3 others in the class. There are only 4 students in the class because that's how big the lighting class is each year. And by Friday morning, I got word that all of them wanted to do it online. So I sat in the classroom with my laptop and talked to them all on the computer on Zoom, like everybody else is. And fortunately, at that point in the semester, we weren't teaching any new material. It was really just looking at their projects and doing a crit on them. And then most of the rest of the semester was drafting on their final project. And so we did that March 13th class, 9 to 12 in the morning. And they all thought it actually went just like it did in the classroom, which was pretty accurate. And we all said goodbye, and I dashed out to Jersey, where I've been since. A couple trips into New York to pick up the mail, but otherwise I'm at my house in New Jersey. The class went on after spring break remotely. It was definitely an experience. The students, in the meantime, had gone wherever they wanted to go because they are not allowed to be in the building or in New York because all the buildings were all shut down. So I had 2 students who were still in the New York area. Class is 9 to 12 on Friday mornings. And so at 9 o'clock, they would be there. I had one student who was in LA. So he had to get up and be online at 6 in the morning in order to attend class. And my student in China, it turned out, had the coronavirus. And he was actually recovering. He was in the hospital in isolation at that point. But it was midnight for him. And he came to class in his little plastic room, as it were. And for him, it was it was midnight. His afternoon class, it was other people, was at 4 in the morning. His family was upset because he wouldn't have dinner with them or try and stay awake during the daytime. He was trying to stay on New York time so he could be awake for all of his classes. But it was a very tough semester for everyone. We did a lot of, students were melting down, understandably. The rug had been pulled under them big time. They're younger than I am, so they haven't been through as much of life, where the rug gets pulled out fairly often, but nothing like this, even for me. But so we'd spend the first half hour to an hour of class just, saying, how is everybody doing? What are you up to? How are other classes going? Is there anything that I can be helpful with? And then we'd go through their projects and explain and talk and give them advice on what to do for their final project, where parts were looking suspect or going to be a problem, and ways to work around it and stuff. It wound up being a much more, in many ways, efficient way of doing the class, except, of course, you could only look at one project at a time. So in the real world room, we would put everything up on the wall side by side, and you can stand 10 feet away and immediately see, oh, that drawing is laid out really clearly, and mine over there is not. So we lost a lot of that kind of thing. And I don't know what's going to come for next spring. They're talking about doing it remotely the whole semester. And I don't know how you teach Vectorworks tools on screen. Obviously, Vectorworks has tutorials and they do this all the time. But I also find that because those are canned things, you're not responding to the person watching and answering questions. And in the real world, the 4 computers are all lined up in front of me with the student facing away. There's a projection screen above the wall in front of them. They face the wall with their computer. And there's projection on top of it, which is my computer screen. And if I say something, I can look over their shoulders and see when somebody is lost.
Yeah.
Or when they're searching the menus, trying to find whatever it is I'm talking about. And we can't do that online. There's no way to catch those moments. So it's going to be interesting, shall we say. But, the end of the semester, NYU usually does a great big design show. It's a gallery presentation in New York in our design space. And it's the first night is a big party. Everybody in the business comes. There will be 200 or 300 people there. And, everybody knows everybody. So there's lots of schmoozing. We have a lot of former students. Our students who are graduating get to meet people in the business and actually, face to face, show them their projects, get to know them a little bit, have some good food, all that stuff. This year we couldn't do that. So they did a virtual gallery, which is actually really beautifully done. It's a 3-dimensional space you can walk through in sort of virtual thing. And each student has a section on the wall and has their picture and their work, and you can click on the work and dig into it and look at it. And it's really wonderfully done. And it's going to stay up for a whole year. And everyone in the department said, this is something we should have started doing 5 years ago. In addition to the party, there should have been this online resource so people are outside can get on. So in that respect, the coronavirus, pushed us to improve the way we do some of these things. And that was one of the few benefits, I guess, of this happening, was we're all better at doing meetings online. And I can't tell you how many production meetings I would rather have done online than sitting in a room and being crapped for 2 hours.
Just one thing come out of this, it'll be that.
If we talk about props for another hour, or why the boots have to be red and not dark brown. Yeah. When it's Zoom, I can always, just keep playing with the dogs or work on something else over here, and nobody cares if I'm paying attention until they say my name. But in person, you're stuck. So it was definitely an interesting semester. And, the other thing that happened, we usually have 3 faculty meetings per semester, one in the beginning of the semester, one halfway through, and one at the end. And as soon as the virus hit, we had them every week. And, oh my God, that's grim. There's usually a tidbit somewhere along the line of actual information that was useful, but there's a lot of just circular whatever. My husband is full-time at NYU. I'm adjunct, so I'm done. I don't have to be involved in faculty meetings anymore, but he's involved in them. He's in one right now on Zoom, and they have basically faculty meetings 4 days a week now.
Wow. Because
there are so many considerations and plannings, and it is really tough. The physical space, they're looking to have everybody back in the physical space, but everybody has to be 6 feet apart and safe. And that means, for instance, the computer lab can't have 4 people in it because they're not 6 feet apart. So one of the big classrooms is going to turn into a computer lab, but it's not big enough for the plotters to be in there along with the people. And if I want to teach remotely, but the students are in the room, how does that work?
Yeah, how do you reach out?
Yeah, and faculty past a certain age, and I'm past a certain age, are required to have the option to teach remotely if they prefer to. So I don't know who all in faculty is elected to teach remotely, but that doesn't necessarily force the whole class to be online. And nobody has really I don't think they've totally thought this through yet, but it also means their workspaces where they have the drafting tables and things, they have to be 6 feet apart. And not only that, but the aisle between the tables has to be 12 feet apart. So it's not possible for anybody to walk within 6 feet of them. And the room that they're currently in is full to the gills with their tables and things. So there's somebody doing a whole lot of drafting to puzzle out all these things. A lot of repurposing of spaces is going on. Other than that, we're having fun. I'm in my house in New Jersey. I'm getting a whole lot of yard work done. I've done more tree trimming than you can imagine. The dogs are thrilled to have us here 24/7. It's been great. We picked raspberries. Our neighbor picked raspberries for us out of our woods last week. We've had fresh raspberry muffins and pies. We're gaining weight at a mad rate.
Yeah, I think it's not been a bad thing for theater people to just chill out for a little bit.
It's not been a bad thing as long as you have a trust fund.
True.
Fortunately, I do have a year's worth of income saved up, and I can, if need be, I'll figure that away until sales perk up again. But when you look at the Broadway production electricians who are gods, the lighting designers, Billington has no work. Nobody does. And it's shocking. And nobody knows really how to spend their time. They're very happy for their $600 a week unemployment. But the government's looking to cut that out because, oh, it costs money. So it's a very strange world we're in right now.
Do you have time for one or two more questions that have come through?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So Bridget's asking about multi-cell fixtures between Vectorworks and Lightwright.
You want to hear the John McKernon solution to this?
Yeah.
The way that Vectorworks does it, there are instructions, and I give a handout to my students that basically is the Vectorworks info. If you follow those instructions exactly, you can make a strip light that actually has 3 circuits and looks sort of like a strip light. But it's really picky, it's really complicated, and it doesn't always work, which may be your experience. What I do is I cheat. I have a symbol that is what the strip light symbol wants to look like, right? It's just a plain old ordinary symbol with, maybe the name of the instrument type on it or whatever, and an arrow to point which way it's pointing. Then underneath it, so there's the symbol that is the light. Then I have a symbol that is like a generic light. Its symbol is nothing more than a tiny little white rectangle, and it has the data attached to it. And I put one of those underneath my regular symbol for each of the circuits. So a 3-circuit, there are 3 of those little white rectangle symbols underneath with their circuit number or their channel number or their color or whatever peeking out from behind the big symbol. And if need be, I can group them and move them around. I usually leave them separate just so I can get to things easier. But that's the John McKernon method. It's way simpler and works. It also means Lightwright counts it correctly, which also works on the Vectorworks method, honestly. But it's not prone to screw ups, or it's just easier.
Just easier. We like that on any show. Just easier.
Yes, I write computer code, but no, it's very hard for me to deal with all that level of detail.
Well, I think we should stop it there, John. That's been a great 2 hours with you.
Cool.
Guys, I see you all have, there's still some questions here we haven't answered, but a lot of them are more like, can it do this and can it do that better? Things like that. Maybe best you just email help@johnmckernon.com and
no, not johnmckernon.com. Help@mckernon.com.
Okay.
There's no John there. Yeah.
Sorry. Help@mckernon.com. And I'm sure John will get to it when he can.
Yes. And I may not reply really quickly this afternoon because we have a friend coming who's bringing 2 corgis to play with ours. So
it's a busy day at the McKernon household.
We do have priorities here.
John, thank you so much for talking to us about Lightwright, and your life advice as well is great. All that stuff about you get the career that you deserve, things like that have all been really great to hear.
Someday I'll post my John's Words of Wisdom, which is about 12 pages of pithy statements. We'll see.
Great. Well, we can't wait for that. Thank you so much for today.
Yes, thank you.
Everyone else, I'll see you in the Magic Sheet Project session in 10 minutes at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much, John. Enjoy your afternoon with the corgis.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.